Hello, everyone. Next up, we have our panel discussion on access to capital for women entrepreneurs. The panel will be moderated by Deborah Burand, who is a professor here at NYU Law. She runs the International Transaction Clinic and works on international finance, microfinance and microfranchise, impact investing, social finance, innovation, and many other topics. She has had experience in both the public and the private sector in places such as the U.S. Department of Treasury, the Federal Reserve, the Overseas Investment Corporation, and the law firm Sherman & Sterling. We're really excited to have her moderate this fantastic panel, and I will turn it over to her to quickly introduce the panelists and the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is such a fun topic and such a great group of women here as our panelists to really give us a chance to go below the surface and really talk about what's happening out there. Let me first say a couple words about what this panel is going to address, and then I'll say a few words about each of our panelists, but I think you also have bios so that you can take a look at that. But this is a panel that is really going to take a look at why women entrepreneurs are critical to the economic development of their communities. And as some of you may know, nationally, women-owned businesses are growing more than twice as fast as other businesses, meaning those not owned by women. And they contribute trillions of dollars to the economy. So, there's something going on when a woman owns a business, and we're going to explore what that opportunity is. But we're also going to explore what I'm calling the state of the entrepreneurship gender gap. And what are the challenges that are holding women back, particularly their ability to access capital to launch a business or to grow and scale a business. I don't want this to only be the what's going wrong. This is a group of women, as you'll soon hear, who are all about making a difference in the private sector, making a difference in the public sector. So we're going to quickly shift to what can happen and how is the public sector responding to the opportunities and challenges that female entrepreneurship brings to the table, and what types of public and private partnerships can be forged to address gender inequities among small businesses. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So let me tell you just a little bit about the women that we have here with us. So let me start with Erin, who's to my far right. Erin is coming to us from the point of view of the federal government, and she is going to be talking about the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA's role in this space. She is the Assistant Administrator for Women's Business Ownership and the Director of the SBA's Office of Women Business Ownership. She also, and I was looking at your bio, so I'm going to ask her to take this point of view as well. She has worked at the state level too, right? Yeah. And so she can talk to both what happens at the federal government level, but also what might happen at the state level. And then I'm going to flip over here to Rachel for a moment. Apologies, Vanessa. So Rachel is sitting here, and she's going to be able to give us the perspective of how a municipality, a city, in this case a very large city, New York City, is responding to the challenges and opportunities in this area. Rachel Van Tosh is the Acting Deputy Commissioner for Business Development at the NYC Department of Small Business Services. Rachel is one of those who was very key to launching the Women Entrepreneurs NYC, and I think we call it We NYC, is that correct? Which is a first of its kind effort in a major American city to uplift women entrepreneurs through tailored business services. So she'll have some really interesting insights about how a city responds to these opportunities and challenges. Then we're just so delighted that Vanessa Best could join us, because how can you talk about female entrepreneurs without a female entrepreneur are sitting with you. So Vanessa Vest is the CEO of Precision Healthcare Consultants. This is a firm that helps doctors and healthcare facilities get paid faster, which is a great way to describe what's probably a much more complex business problem. Among other things, she has won all sorts of awards, but the one I wanted to highlight for you today is that she was recently selected as a facilitator and instructor for the SBA Emerging Leaders Program, and she's a proud new mentor of the inaugural We NYC. So you sort of are spanning both of these sides, aren't you? Perfect. This is an opportunity for us. The way we're going to structure this discussion is I've asked each speaker to talk for 5 minutes, a little bit about where they're coming from, how they look at these issues, give you context so that you can understand the conversation we're going to hold. Then we'll move to a moderated conversation that I'll be moderating here among the panelists. And then at the end, we're going to open it up so that we can hear your questions in case we haven't gotten to some of the issues that you're most interested in. Okay? So maybe we'll start with Erin and then just to Vanessa and then to you, Rachel. So go ahead.
Great, okay. And if I talk too much, you can go like
I have the
this to me,
prerogative.
'cause I
I'll
tend to
do
be
that.
long-winded, so.
Okay. I can't quite kick you under the
Yeah,
table
no,
the way I
that's
can
fine.
the others, but
Just throw something at me. No, I'm just kidding. So the Small Business Administration, and we have a lot of federal agencies that work in some way, shape, or form with small businesses. But the SBA really sole mission is to work with America's small businesses, and we do that in 3 major ways. One being, which I'm going to go into a little bit today, which is the access to capital. We have loan guarantees. We work with conventional banks, but we also work with microlenders and other folks in the ecosystem who are providing access to capital. And then access to contracts, 23% of federal government spend needs to go to small businesses. So we work with those federal agencies to ensure that small businesses are accessing that. And then third, through counseling. And we have 14,000 resource partners across the country that provide free and at low cost counseling and training to anyone that walks through their doors. So oftentimes, we don't have an ad budget. We depend on earned media. So a lot of folks don't know that there are free resources available through the federal government. So that's something we really try to talk about. But in the access to capital space, I think for women specifically, we've seen an increase. The recent census numbers just came out in December. And there are 9.8 million women business owners in this country. And that's been a 27.8% increase since 2007, which is incredible. And I know we've heard a lot of discussion around the pay gap, and specifically how atrocious the pay gap is for minority women-owned small businesses too. There are some positive things in the women's business ownership space. Like I said, 27.8% across the board increase for women-owned businesses. And African American women-owned businesses have seen an increase since 2007 of 67.5%. And Hispanic women-owned businesses have seen an increase of 87%. So I just say that because I think there are a lot of women starting to realize that if they hire, they will hire well, they'll pay well, and they are starting their own businesses. I think a challenge that we've seen is 89.7% of the women-owned businesses out there don't have employees. So something we really focus on, and to the Emerging Leaders Program, is really how do you help grow a business, and how do we get these women to start thinking about growth as a positive thing? Because when they hire, they do hire well, and they hire from their communities. We've seen a couple of challenges in the access to capital space. I know in that last conversation, negotiation kind of came up a little bit. The whole conversation around asking if women don't negotiate their first or second job, they lose over $500,000 over their lifetime. Men are 7 to 9 times more likely to negotiate when they negotiate their first or second job. So we see that playing out in the access to capital space. We can tell you we've done studies on women trying to access bank capital. And we've seen that they don't access the capital, or they don't even make the initial ask sometimes, not because they don't have the financial profile to get it, but out of fear of not getting that financial capital. So I think that's something on the counseling piece that a lot of our counselors work with women entrepreneurs to make sure they're asking, because a lot of women are undercapitalized. One other challenge we've been addressing at the SBA after the recession, so banks, just to be very, I'm going to simplify it a little bit. For me, it costs banks the same to do a $5 million loan as it does to do a $150,000 loan, because we see more women starting out in the service industries where they're not as capital intensive at the beginning, they don't need the $5 million loan. There are some women who do, which is amazing, and we need more women, buying factories and getting $5 million loans, don't get me wrong. But to even get women in the pipeline, there was such a barrier because especially after the recession, banks, they didn't have the capacity to give a lot of those smaller dollar loans out. And also sometimes they were a little riskier. And the SBA loan guarantee helps take some of that risk off of the banks. So a couple of things we've done on the access to capital side is we've done a fee relief on loans under $150,000. So it doesn't cost the bank anything. And usually they have to pay a fee to use a loan guarantee on those smaller dollar loans. And we've seen an uptick in women accessing those loans. And we've done a couple of other things on the underwriting of our smaller dollar loans just to help get women in the door and kind of accessing capital to begin with. So there's so much more out there, but like I said, I could go on and on. So I'll wait till the question and answer session. But that's just kind of an overview of what we're doing on the federal side and the SBA side.
Thank you very much. So, Vanessa, how does it look to you?
Okay, it looks pretty good. I'll give you a little background about myself. It was mentioned that I help doctors and facilities get paid faster. So what that basically means in the healthcare space, I work with clinical documentation improvement. So when a doctor sees a patient, they have to write it down. You remember the old-fashioned charts now. A lot of times they do it in an electronic medical record. But what happens, there's an agency that you may have heard of called Medicare. Has anyone heard of Medicare? Okay, they're kind of big by the federal government. What happens is when a doctor submits a bill to Medicare, Medicare assumes that the codes that the doctor puts on the bill or the hospital puts on the bill are correct. So based on that assumption, Medicare can go back to that doctor's office maybe 3 or 4 years after they have paid, and they can say, let me see your clinical documentation that supports the work that you've billed. And guess what happens? Sometimes the clinical documentation does not support what Medicare paid that doctor or that hospital. So what Medicare says is, okay, we paid you X amount of money. We want a percentage of that money back. Then Medicare can also say, based on our assessment, since 10% of what we evaluated was incorrect, we're going to assume that 10% of everything that you did over the last 5 years was also incorrect. Therefore, we want the money back. So when that happens to a doctor, as one of our clients this week it happened to, the first call is to an attorney. So for all of you, you're in a good place, okay? The first call is to their healthcare attorney. The healthcare attorney's first call is to a firm like mine that comes in as a specialist, as a certified and credentialed team to really help these doctors or facilities kind of get out of their problems or provide them with some training. So that's part of what we do in terms of helping doctors get paid faster. Now, one of the things that was mentioned to me, it said that I should talk about the importance of enabling women entrepreneurs to prosper. So I said, what am I going to say? I'm a very, very passionate person. I started my business 20 years ago. Some of you may have heard of a hospital, Weill Cornell. You've heard of that hospital. Worked there for a long time. Worked at several hospitals throughout New York City. And what I found is after helping the facilities make money, I wanted to do it for myself. There was a gentleman at my job, no disrespect to the men in the room, and this gentleman started his own business while working at the hospital. He was doing medical billing and consulting for doctors. At that time in my life, 20 years ago, I was thinking about a work balance. I was thinking about having my first child. But I didn't want to be in an office every day. I wanted to manage my own skill. So I looked at this gentleman, and I honestly said to myself, he's not that smart, no disrespect. But I said, if he could do it, I could do it. So that was the beginning of me actually becoming an entrepreneur. There was a doctor at Cornell that was leaving the hospital to start their own private practice. I negotiated my first contract. My knees were shaking. My palms were sweating. But the doctor told me yes. I was like, yes. But I didn't honestly have all of the skills to run a business. I knew what to do. I was a good clinical documentation person. I was a good biller. But did I have all of the business acumen? Honestly, I didn't. So I just kind of figured things out. 20 years ago, I don't think Twitter was around 20 years ago, was it? Or Google. So you couldn't just go on and Google, like, you know, how do I get this expertise? How do I raise capital? It wasn't, at least I wasn't aware in my community. So what did I do? I used a credit card. I borrowed money from family and friends. Not really the best way to do it, but I'm just being honest with you. That was my state 20 years ago. Fast forward, as I have moved on in my career and in my life, I found out about these amazing programs like the SBA that just offers so much, and I won't talk a lot about it because that's part of our questions. And then also when we hear from Rachel about some things that the Small Business Solution Center is doing for entrepreneurs. So I kind of quote Maya Angelou, you may have heard of her, and I'll sum up with that because I talk a lot too.
That's good, that's good.
Maya Angelou always said, well, one of her famous quotes was, never have a mitt in both hands. And the reason why is, if you have a mitt in both hands, you're always catching. She said, don't have a mitt in one hand so you can give something back. So I'm very passionate about giving back to women entrepreneurs, very, very excited about being here. And you're gonna learn about some great programs that we have right here in this city and state to really help women entrepreneurs become successful.
Wow. I'm so glad you're on this panel. So, you know, I think one of the things you're going to notice is every woman here, and probably out there as well, and maybe the men too, but at least I know on this panel, they are driven by a passion. And Rachel, when we first met on the phone, you said, and I wrote it down, I'm passionate about public service and women's role in economic development. And I thought, good for you. Good for you. I'm not sure how many times I introduce myself by telling people what my passions are. So tell us about what you're doing.
Sure. So that is absolutely correct. I am passionate both about public service and about women and women's entrepreneurship and the power that women entrepreneurs have. So I work for the New York City Department of Small Business Services, and we do three things there. We create stronger jobs, good businesses, and a fairer economy, and we do that by helping people connect to employment, by working with community groups across the city, and by building the capacity of small businesses and entrepreneurs. We NYC is a project that we started, I guess, a little over a year ago now, although it seems like just a few months ago, where we've made a commitment for the first time as a city government, really anywhere in the country, to support the women entrepreneurs that are in New York City. And there are actually more than 350,000 women entrepreneurs just in New York City alone, and they contribute nearly 200,000 jobs to our economy and $50 billion in sales. So they're really the backbone of the city, and they're growing very quickly. And you know, we launched this program with the input of women all across the 5 boroughs to figure out what they need in order to grow. And we're very excited to have Vanessa be part of that with us. And I'll talk a lot more about the services that we'll be offering in the coming months.
Terrific. So I think we're going to move to our sort of moderated discussion, and my goal here is that I will ask questions, and I'll ask less and less because they'll start talking with each other. So let's see how we can do on this. I'm going to sort of throw this question first to both Erin and Rachel, and don't worry, Vanessa, you're coming in. You've given us some really interesting statistics, both at a national level and at a city level, about the heft, the size, the economic, engine that female entrepreneurship can bring to the table. What else? Why else would one focus on women right now? What are the benefits beyond just the fact that they're growing businesses quickly and that grows the economy, which is huge. That's huge. I don't want to minimize that, but why the focus on women?
Well, I think a couple of things, and we've been looking at this. So if you look at the purchasing power in this country, women have 85% of the purchasing power in this country. They buy most of the stuff that we use. So to me, that says, if women are going to make investment decisions, if women are going to start businesses, they're going to be catering to the people who spend most of the money in this country. So like, to me, I think it's, I mean, not only an economic decision, I think there are a lot of factors involved that we talked about. You know, women have the opportunity to hire, they hire well, they set good wages, they solve problems. One, I think just one initiative, we just to kind of target that 85% purchasing power, we just launched something last year called Innovate Her, because we looked at this 85% purchasing power, but yet women make up, you know, they're less than 6% of venture capitalists and receive, as entrepreneurs, less than 3% of venture capital funding. So, and I always joke, I'm like, this is why there's not a high heel that turns automatically into a flat, because if we had women who were making investment decisions, clearly there would be solutions we would be finding. And so I think what we did as an agency is we did a call to action to organizations to hold hackathons and business plan competitions focused on products and services that impact women's lives and working families' lives, because a lot of women, if had the opportunity to make some investment decisions, would actually make those decisions and a lot, you know, and invest in a lot of women-owned businesses who were solving some of the problems that women were dealing with. So we had over 200 competition, or over 300 competitions over the course of the last year, and have a final competition coming up in March. But we're really hoping to not only start the conversation around the need to really fill this gap, but then also to really find some of those inventions that not only impact women's workplace flexibility and work-life balance, but also, you know, invest in some good women entrepreneurs and find some great women entrepreneurs or women that can also be investors. So that's just kind of an example of something we've sort of looked at as a way to sort of in why.
How do you answer that kind of question when people say, why a women's entrepreneurship initiative in New York City beyond the economic?
Beyond the economics.
Yeah.
Well, this administration is extremely committed that all New York City entrepreneurs have the resources that they need to grow and to thrive in the city. And in the initial research that we did around women entrepreneurship, we found that men own 1.5 times more companies, they employ 3.5 times more people, and generate actually 4.5 times more in sales. So there's a real gap there that we found in the initial work on this, specifically in New York City. And in addition to that, 1 in 4 women and girls in New York City live in poverty. So we thought that there was a real reason to spend time thinking about how we can improve on this gap. And we really believe that, you know, by investing in women entrepreneurs, we're not only generating economic benefits, but we're uplifting entire communities and families in the process.
That's very interesting. You know, I work in the microfinance space internationally, and the reason microfinance institutions have focused on women is because that's the face of poverty, you know, in today's world. So that's it's an interesting point. I don't want to put you on the spot, Vanessa, but do you know how that men's business has gone since you started doing yours? Is it even still in existence?
Not as well as mine.
No, so, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how is it that being a woman shapes the way you approach your business maybe a little differently, or are there? And you know, feel free to say it doesn't.
That's a very interesting question. I would say I've learned and come to appreciate, piggybacking on what you said, Erin, women do not always ask for what they deserve. Having lunch today, I was speaking with some, I think they're called L2s and L1s, am I saying it correctly? And I was telling them about just a situation I had this week where I had sent a proposal, but it came back kind of interesting. It came back higher almost, so I had to think, okay, am I going to stick to my old pricing, or am I going to be bold and demand for, you know, really what I should get? So I think as a woman, inherently, we don't always negotiate the same way. We sometimes feel that we need to accept just to get in the door or just to get something. But I've learned that that is not acceptable to be successful. It doesn't empower us as women. It empowers us not to be arrogant, but to value our worth, to demand what we should get. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, there's another fact that I think, actually, Erin, I think you may have brought up, but I want to keep this open so anybody jump in here. This question about women not employing others, what's going on there? Is it the size of the business, or is there some other risk aversion culturally that's happening?
And I mean, I would definitely turn to Rachel on this too. I think it's a couple of things, and I think there's some women who, lifestyle-wise, start a business and don't want to, deal with them, which is totally fine and a great opportunity for them if they, if that fits what they want. I also think there's this population of women who it's the whole thinking bigger, asking, the aversion to taking on some debt to actually grow, which when you have a business oftentimes is something you have to, very much think about. I wanted to quickly turn to the asking part, because I think there's a real cultural conversation, and I know there's a lot of debate over it, so I'm not trying to say that I, fall on one side or the other, but this whole internalization of failure, women are oftentimes more fearful of failure, and we've been really trying to, and can I give a quick example? So I was talking to a woman who runs a very, popular accelerator out of Stanford in the Bay Area, and I was asking her how many women went through this accelerator. And she's like, well, I need to go look that up and let me check. And she came back and she was kind of floored by the fact that they didn't have many women in the accelerator. I mean, she kind of knew, but she wasn't. So she looked at the stats, and it takes 3 to 5 times to get into this accelerator. Like, you usually are denied the first time, and you have to reapply, and you get help, and there are mentors to help you reapply, and you have to reapply 2 or 3 times. And she said when she looked at the stats, they had almost no women going first or past that first fail. Like, they failed once, and they were like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, I'm out of here. Whereas the guys saw it as a challenge. And it was kind of like, all right, this is awesome. And so this is not SBA data I'm going to give you here, but this is her take on it. She thought it went back to dating, where women are taught to be courted, to wait to be asked, and men are always asking, sometimes outside of their league, over and over and over and over again. Which is fine. So I'm always like, maybe women just need to leave these kinds of talks and go ask men out on dates more often. I don't know what the solution is. But it does, there are all these cultural things. Women do so well academically. And it's like, if you don't get the A, you don't get the A+, you get the A-, or you get the B+, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure now. And trust me, I was there too. And I think oftentimes with entrepreneurship, you see people that have failed. 1/5 of U.S. entrepreneurs have had learning disabilities because they're used to failing, they're thinking outside the box, they're trying to figure out a new solution. And so I think a message we've been really trying to talk about with women is, let's fail forward. Like, you're gonna fail, but how do you fail and move forward with it? And I think that's something in academia we sometimes have to have a conversation around. I know in entrepreneurship it absolutely has to happen. And some of the women who have failed, any of the entrepreneurs who've been successful had failed at some point. So that's just an honest conversation I think needs to happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I like to add on, as an entrepreneur, when you're starting your business, you are everything. You are the accountant, you are Swaze lawyer, you are the mailman, you are the sales agent, you are everything. So to take your business to the next level requires capital. And I think for many entrepreneurs, and that's why I'm so thrilled to be in the We NYC program, some women are in underserved areas, they're in underrepresented areas, and they don't know. They're not familiar with reading their financial statements. They don't know what a profit and loss, and that doesn't make them a bad entrepreneur. They just don't have the business acumen. So we continue, I feel as an entrepreneur, we need more programs like We NYC that's going to teach women, okay, this is how you read a financial statement. Because when you're sitting at a bank and you have to present documentation, that's a very scary thing. How do you feel when you go to your accountant and you're like, okay, well, do I have everything together? Did I get all, there's some anxiety. So for a woman, running a business and having to go to a bank and sit and bring these papers, and they're not clear on what they need and what the result is going to be, that precludes a lot of women, I think, from actually taking that step to hiring someone. So programs that we have like WE NYC and also with the SBA, those are great programs that entrepreneurs can really use to take their businesses to the next level.
I mean, interestingly, when we asked the question of women entrepreneurs that we surveyed in our most recent study, they actually had very similar aspirations to their male counterparts in terms of revenue growth every year, in terms of hiring. So they have those ambitions, but one of the biggest discrepancies we saw was around their willingness to rate themselves as proficient in different areas,
Yeah.
and their willingness to take risk, or their self-assessed willingness to take risk. So, for example, I think 3/4 of the women that we surveyed who had more than 6 years of business experience, so very well-versed women entrepreneurs, didn't feel that they were highly proficient in any core business skills, where men, it was like 50 or 60% of them felt that way, maybe less. So you see that women are extremely ambitious and, in my opinion, really just as talented, maybe more, but they're not confident in their own abilities. And it is something that we're working on through We NYC, so I'm happy to talk a bit about that.
And it's interesting because I'm hearing that from you all, but disagree if I'm not getting it right, that some of this lack of confidence, it can diminish access to all sorts of resources. So it can diminish your ability to get capital. It could also perhaps become an obstacle for you to get human capital, hence employment, right? Because you're worried about whether or not you're now putting someone else at risk as well as yourself with your business. And so that this cultural issue is really, it can be really quite pervasive in how that in and of itself sort of dampens the growth or even the launch of a business.
Absolutely, and I think that comes in a number of different ways. I mean, we're attacking it certainly in a few different methods. So we have wonderful mentors like Vanessa who can talk to women about their experience and the issues that you've come across, the mistakes that you've made over your many years in business. We're also offering courses specifically on leadership and confidence building and developing soft skills, which is something that has been tried across the country with success. And one of the things we also heard from the woman that we spoke with was that they just don't feel that their skills are strong enough. So not only attacking it from the side of you need to be more confident, here's how to negotiate better, but really making sure that women have the background to understand how to read their financials, what banks are going to be looking for, what alternative lenders are going to be looking for, so they can, come in feeling extremely prepared. That helps to build confidence too.
And just, here I go again, right? Another thing that I think is great about our city and our state, for being a woman entrepreneur, there's certain goals that are met or that are put out, I should say. So for any state funding in New York State or New York City, there is a law, it's called Local Law 1, where 30% of that procurement money has to go to a minority or woman-based business. So that is huge, huge, huge. So again, for women entrepreneurs to be familiar with some of these state and city mandated laws and to take advantage of them is really a good thing. I know Erin spoke about there's even goals for the government, that there's certain set-asides for women, and the same thing within the city of New York. We NYC dives into some of those as part of their program as well. So there's good things to really help women accelerate. One, if you want a good book on the confidence conversation, if you haven't read The Confidence Code, it's a really, really good book. It scientifically breaks it down. So that's not SBA endorsing anything. That's just me saying it was an interesting read on that topic. One thing we've seen a lot with banks, because I'll do kind of lender roundtables when I go to different places across the country, is if the banks are connected in the ecosystem. So like if your conventional banks are connected with your micro lenders, it makes a huge difference, because oftentimes a woman might not realize there's a micro lender in her community, and she'll go to her bank or a conventional bank asking for a loan, and it's probably too small of a dollar loan for that bank. It just isn't worth
the profit margin for the bank, so they'll say no. And so we've been really trying to get a lot of those more conventional banks to do is that, no, but I know someone who might be able to help you out who is a micro lender who also has technical assistance associated with it. So it's not we went back to the whole accelerator conversation, no, women don't come back. So what's the no but conversation that should be occurring within the ecosystem specifically related to access to capital? So that's something we've been looking at a lot.
Can I ask a quick question about that? Is there ever a gap between what the microfinance lender can do and what the banks would do? And how do you, is there a gap and how do you fill it?
Yeah.
So the city operates a system that we call NYC Business Solutions, which Vanessa mentioned earlier, and it's a set of services that are delivered in centers across the city. And one of the services that we offer is financing. And the city actually does not do any loan guarantee programs. We don't have actual capital that we lend. What we do in those centers is that we help prepare people for financing. So we work with a group of more than 40 lenders across the city, everything from TD Bank down to small micro lenders like Axione. So someone can come in and say, this is my business, this is where I'm at, I need X amount of money, where should I go? What should I do? And our business solutions staff will sit down and say, okay, I think you're actually a good fit for this lender or that lender. And we connect businesses to tens of millions of dollars every year through that work. We also have developed what we call second look partnerships with something like TD Bank. So when they get a business who's coming to them for $30,000, which they wouldn't lend to you even if you were a great business potentially, or you're not ready or you're too risky of a profile, they can send them to us and we can redirect people. But oftentimes what we find is that there is a gap in sort of like medium-sized loans. So,
And I would say just one other thing that has been changing over the course of the last 5 to 10, well, more like 5 years, is the crowdfunding conversation.
And crowdfunding,
And
yeah.
women tend to over-index with crowdfunding just because it's used as a marketing tool almost before it's used as an access to capital tool for, and women tend to be really good marketers. So and it's just easier for them to sell because they can kind of, connect the cause and the passion around the business to the actual need for access to capital. So we've seen so many more women on the crowdfunding side, whether it be Kickstarter or Indiegogo or Plum Alley, but we've also seen now that the SEC rules have been passed for equity-based crowdfunding, I think that's going to open up a larger conversation specifically for women that's going to be probably pretty promising. So I just wanted to point that out too, in that kind of gap.
No, I think that's true. In the survey work that we did, it was interesting. Men were twice as likely to go to a traditional lender, like your regular bank that you see on the corner, but women were much more likely to have crowdfunded their startup capital. So that's definitely true.
And it's a
At least in New York.
relational thing. Like
Yeah.
with crowdfunding, you're working with your friends in your community, and women that's a natural fit for them. So it just makes sense. So
Vanessa, could you talk to us a little bit about how you evolved in your thinking about where your sources of funding would be for your business? Because you said you sort of started it at a place that where you were really taking your own money, right?
Oh, yes, I did, initially. Now I take others. Yes, so it was, for me as an entrepreneur, it was an education, being honest with you. One of the things that I was privileged to go through is the Goldman Sachs program. Goldman Sachs has a program called the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. And their goal, you have to have a certain number of employees, your revenues need to be at a certain level, and they provide the business acumen training. And that was something that was lacking for me. I was good at what I did. My employees were good at what they did, but I needed to take my business to another level. And that really helped me to propel it and to realize that, okay, now I am at a point where I can take some risk. And I understand my financials, and I can sit with a banker, and I can go through this and not feel intimidated, and I can negotiate. And if they come at one rate, I can negotiate another rate. That gave me confidence, and that moved me and propelled me to a different level.
That's interesting. I'd like to shift for a second on, we were talking about these different types of programs that are being available. Can we tease out a little bit more of the toolkit that is available for a federal player versus a state player versus a city, and sort of get a better picture of that landscape of the support that's out there? And I'll start with you, Erin, and then I'll turn to you, Rachel.
Yeah, and I mean, ours are very interconnected. So at SBA, we have 68 district offices across the country, and those district offices work very closely with the local folks. I mentioned our resource partners. We have over 14,000 resource partners across the country. They're getting federal funding, but they're oftentimes getting state and local funding to help support them. They're grants that we give so they can provide the counseling and training. So it's very much intertwined on the counseling side. On the access to capital side, and I mentioned we have our loan guarantees. We have two programs at SBA, a working capital program, which is our 7A program, which goes up to $5 million with no floor, and our 504 program, which is for equipment and real estate, and that goes up to $5 million with no floor either. Those are two loan guarantee programs. So we work with the banks to provide that loan guarantee, and then our microloan program is $50,000 or below, and we work with microloan intermediaries. And then we have one other program, which is the Small Business Investment Company program, and it's almost like we provide funding to kind of venture capital mezzanine financiers. So it's a venture debt program that's available to small businesses. So those are kind of on the financing side what's available, and then on the counseling side that's available. I don't know if that...
Can I ask you a question now? This is when I become my nerd deal person.
No.
Okay,
Nerd
so
too, so
with your guarantees, is the idea, I guess, first of all, is it a full guarantee? Is it a partial guarantee?
It's a partial.
And what are you trying to motivate in those lenders?
It's usually the folks that are not getting, that's a great question, I should have clarified that. The folks that are kind of right in the middle, that can't get that conventional loan. For some reason, they might not have the collateral, like all the collateral that they need. They might not have something else. So it's going to be too much of a risk for the bank to use a conventional loan on them. But the loan guarantee at 85% is about, it gives them a little bit of leeway, and it gives the bank some cover so they can take that risk. So it's an opportunity for us to really capture folks who are sort of almost there, but not quite. And that's where the federal government, I think, plays that role. On the microloan program, it's very much up to the intermediary. They set their own terms, and those are way more high risk. I think something else that is kind of the elephant in the room on the lending side right now are the alternative lenders that are getting into the space. Mm-hmm. And that, it depends on who you talk to, and it depends on which lender. It could be considered predatory lending from some people's perspective. Depending on the interest rates, the APRs of like 60 or 70%. So I think there's a lot of financial acumen that's needed to kind of understand what deals some folks are getting into. And we're finding that a lot of our counselors are having to sit down, which is good. They're there to do this, to kind of look at some of those deals so that folks understand if they take on this, alternative loan, that they're going to have to pay it back within 6 months, or or else they're going to have a 70% interest rate, which is sort of crazy. But some people need that short-term working capital. So for some folks who understand the financial aspects of it, it might work out. But it's just you worry about those who might not, and so that's where I think we see our counseling components really coming in.
So that's a financial literacy challenge then.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll add to why that may be a good risk to get financing for 6 months. One of the things that I mentioned is about procurement opportunities through the state or through the city. So as an entrepreneur, if you get a $2 million contract, and you need to, even in the services industry as an attorney, and you need to hire someone immediately, that may be a good idea to get that funding, because within that 6-month period your contract will kick in, once it's signed, of course, and then you'll be able to repay those funds. So sometimes there are good reasons, especially for an entrepreneur, to take that type of risk, but it comes to the education part. But the procurement that's available in New York City, that 30%, and also in New York State, huge opportunities and huge amounts of money that's available.
I'm going to ask another question about the guarantees. Are you, and I don't know if you're even tracking this, but are you seeing the financial institutions that are benefiting from these guarantees seeing a market for themselves and starting to change their view about the riskiness? I mean, are you crowding them down to into this space, or are they sort of saying, no, I'll do it as long as there's always a guarantee?
It's a good question, and honestly, it would probably be a conversation for the lenders, and I think it depends on the lender too. We're seeing we're seeing more lenders come into the space because they're seeing that it's sort of an opportunity that was somewhat untapped in the past. And I think we're also seeing more lenders on those lower dollar loan amounts that, they're willing, they can start to do these loans where they couldn't before because it just cost-wise, it wasn't making sense. But I think I would say it's increasing the number of folks who are signing up to be, to do the loan guarantee. And I think part of it in 2010, we had the Jobs Act, which was passed, that increased the guarantee and provided some more capital into the market. So I think you saw a lot of banks starting to take more advantage after that. We're still sort of seeing a leveling out of that, but there's still, a record number of folks who are signed up. And we have folks who have guarantees who don't necessarily use it. Like, they have the ability to use the guarantee, but they're not always using it too. So.
Rachel, I'd love your thoughts as you're sort of thinking about what's in your toolbox from a city point of view, and where do you think that you've got some maybe critical advantages or unique advantages as a player in this space?
Sure. So I think from the city's perspective, we don't tend to lend, or as I mentioned, we don't do the guarantee side of things. Although we do have several programs, both at the city and state levels, to help those who are bidding on contracts get financing quickly based on the award of contracts. So that is one area where we, deliver capital to entrepreneurs that we're investing in. But we tend to work more on the capacity building side rather than the lending side. As I said, we connect people to lenders. So through WeNYC, there are 2 programs that we will be developing in collaboration with partners of ours. One focuses on credit. It's not something that we've talked about explicitly in this conversation yet, but for women entrepreneurs, especially sort of underserved women entrepreneurs, recent immigrants, they see and really have credit as a significant barrier to accessing capital. Because if you have a bad credit report or very low credit score, you're very risky, and typical banks and even alternative lenders are sometimes less likely to lend to you. So we're working on a program with a number of our partners, specifically Grameen America, to work with their borrowers, and they have more than 30,000 borrowers in the city, many of whom are low-income women entrepreneurs, to teach them about credit, how to build credit, what is a credit score, why it's important, how that can help them grow their business in the future. We'll be piloting that in the coming months. In addition to the credit work we're doing, we are also developing a class that addresses many of the things we've talked about in terms of planning to access capital. So making sure you understand your financials, understanding where you want your business to grow and when, and at what point in your business should you be looking for what types of capital, and then connecting women to those sources of capital, so your banks or your micro lenders or a crowdfunding platform.
That's a perfect transition to a question. I'm getting very nosy, Vanessa, so you tell me when I ask a question that's inappropriate, or just answer something else.
Or just smile.
Just smile. Do you have any equity shareholders in your company, or are you the only owner?
I'm the only owner.
Would you ever be open to selling equity in your company? We've been talking about debt, so.
That's a good question that I'm just going to smile about.
It's interesting.
It's a very good question. not ready to comment on that right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we'll get to you in just a second. I think it's an interesting question because up to now we've been talking about debt financing, and with equity, you're sharing ownership, and that brings both opportunities, but it also can bring challenges because you're no longer the one calling all the shots, right? Are you doing anything in the equity space?
Yeah,
Erin?
so our SBIC program is both debt and equity. It's more on the mezzanine finance side, but we do have kind of an earlier stage financing focus through it as well. The conversation around equity and women comes up a lot because, I mean, there are a couple of things and factors to consider. I know a lot of women, especially if you're getting a contract through the state or through the government, you have to be 51% female owned. So if you give up too much equity, you lose that status and you can't get contracts anymore. So
Unless you're selling equity to other women.
and that's what I was going to say. So that's why there's definitely a push to get more female investors, absolutely, which is really, really critical. And I think that's a point that folks are pushing a lot. I think we also have seen sometimes women give up equity too soon because so few women have the opportunity, especially in the venture capital space, that they're giving up equity way too quickly. Convertible debt is an option, but I also feel like convertible debt in the VC space sometimes is used as a way, I mean, it can be manipulated in ways that aren't always the best for the entrepreneur.
Just a footnote, convertible debt would be a debt instrument that upon certain triggers can turn into equity,
yes,
and
sorry,
it could
thank
turn
you.
into different types of equity, but it is often what people do, I always think of it as like the engagement, we'll keep our dating thing, the engagement before you get married. You know, how is this going? Let's be just on a borrower-lender model, and then maybe we'll turn it into
Great,
equity.
thank you for, and I mean, that's something we've looked at because you can do that in the SBIC program as well, and does that make sense for women to assess if they need to give up all the equity? But I think it's really being educated on the options and the terms and what makes the most sense, because you don't want to just, especially too early, sometimes you don't want to give up equity right away. And I think sometimes we do see women who do that because there's this might be it's right there, we need to grow, we need to do this quickly, and they don't realize the implications later on down the road. I mean, that's true for any entrepreneur, but I think that women get so less equity investment than men that sometimes the options unfortunately are a little bit more slim. I do think something we're seeing, and I mean the less than 6% of women being venture capitalists, like women in finance, it's got to change, and it's slowly starting to. You're seeing more funds that are opening and being run by women, and I think as we see that shift, I'm hopeful that we'll see more options for women entrepreneurs as well. I mean, women aren't just going to invest in women entrepreneurs, I'm not saying that, but I do think you see a lot of women who are investors that are investing in women entrepreneurs, and I think it's going to only be good for women entrepreneurs in the long run.
So I've been seeing some hands, so thank you for being patient. You raised your hand very first, so yeah, so if...
That's because I have a very obvious question. When you think about women entrepreneurs, you think about Carol's daughter and Amy's bread. What are some of the spaces that women, or all entrepreneurs for that matter, should be gravitating into as we're moving forward? It doesn't necessarily have to be an innovation economy as all these startup and co-working spaces are popping up. But what are some of the opportunities out there? A lot of people, like I tell a lot of kids I work with, you have to think of your entrepreneurship like as a job. You know, they think they have the skill set, or they don't believe they have the skill set when they really do. So what are some of the opportunities that are out there that women entrepreneurs should be gravitating towards to pay their bills?
So I think nationally, like there's this, we use the regional innovation cluster strategy where you look at those, if you want to look at, so everyone needs a dry cleaner, everyone needs restaurant, I mean, everyone needs those, you know, small businesses that are in their community, those Main Street businesses. So there's, depending on competition, and then a great tool for folks to look at is sba.gov/sizeup, because you can look at other competitors sort of in the local area and see if there are any or if there's a gap. But I think when you're looking at high growth or where there might be an emerging market in your area, look a lot of, and I'm sure in New York, and I'll turn it to Rachel on this, most cities and then most states have done an analysis on their top growth sectors and where they're, you know, where they have a lot of folks in the supply chain or potential gaps in the supply chain. So I was in Iowa for a long time, and I'll use an example in Iowa. wind energy was one where we saw a huge gap. We had 2 of the 3 major manufacturing lines to build a wind turbine, or to build a windmill. We were missing the wind tower manufacturer, and we were able to kind of identify how to bring suppliers in and fill that major gap. So I think looking at those emerging markets, and that's where the government can play a great role of working with the private sector and some of the larger businesses that are there. And I'm sure you have.
No, I think that that's absolutely right. We also collect data on growing sectors in the economy, but I have a slightly different perspective on this, which I'd be interested to hear what you think, Vanessa. And that's that we found that, at least for the women that we worked with, they almost all started their companies out of a passion for what they do. So I think, yes, it's very important to look and see if your company would be competitive in your neighborhood, but I think you also need to have a core passion for the business you're going to start. Because as Vanessa said, when you start, you are everything. And it's not even a 10-hour-a-day job, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. So you need to have that fundamental interest. That's part of how I would answer that question. I don't know if you agree.
I agree with that. I'm going to quote Maya Angelou just one more time. One of the things she said, and it speaks so well, Rachel, she said, don't make money your goal. She said, don't make money your goal. Be passionate about what you do and do it so well that people can't take their eyes off of you. And I just love that because I don't want people taking their eyes off of me. So I think that that's so true. You have to be passionate. And then also as an entrepreneur, one of the things that we do, there's so many sources that are free. There's something called Open Book that you can look and you can see where money is being spent right here in New York. You can look at the contract reporter. For example, in healthcare, 6.2 billion, not million, $6.2 billion is going to be spent in the next 5 years on something called DSRIP. And DSRIP is restructuring the Medicaid program. That's huge. LaGuardia Airport, $4-point-something billion. Those are construction. So I say passion and research, as Erin and Rachel mentioned.
Thank you. Do you want to?
You were talking about predatory lending. Do you think women are more vulnerable to predatory lending? And does predatory lending lead to entrepreneurs not succeeding? And is there like a takeaway that we can get if women are vulnerable to predatory lending? Why is that so, and how can we stop it?
No, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think it comes down to education, and I think we've kind of heard like the financial literacy component is key and is the most important thing. I think there are a lot of options out there for small businesses that weren't out there 5 years ago. And if we do not have the education associated, I mean, to Vanessa's point, there are some loans that are great for small businesses, but if you don't know that if you don't pay this back in 6 months, or you don't understand that it's going to up to this much money, it could just put you under. I mean, it will bankrupt you. And so I think, I mean, it's a great question, and I don't have stats that say that women are more prone to predatory lending, but I do think we've seen there is a little bit more of a gap sometimes on the financial literacy side that needs to be filled, that, would prevent some of the predatory lending that could happen. And I think just given the changes and sort of, I know someone quoted the wild, wild west of alternative, our old administrator, I think, used that quote of kind of the lending space right now for small businesses, where they're just still figuring out laws and boundaries and other things. So I think first and foremost, just making sure you're educated, and women specifically are educated on those terms is so key.
I completely agree with that. I also don't have any stats specifically on the question of whether women are more vulnerable to predatory lending or lending that might not be advantageous for them. But I think that women are often less aware of the consequence of different loans, of what alternatives are out there, so making sure that the women have that information and is easily accessible to them is extremely important.
I think I want to ask the flip side of that question, which is, who is the government watchdog, or who are the government watchdogs to make sure that credit and equity, if there are any laws that concern that, especially on the equity side, are extended to women and minorities on an equal basis. So people who have similar credit profiles are getting equal access to loans. Is there a government agency that handles that? And is there even a law that protects people from sort of disparate impact type treatment, where it's not that you don't lend to women, but that you don't lend to people who have a certain, quality that very disproportionately impacts women or minorities?
So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is probably the best one to answer your question. I mean, just with laws, SEC obviously with the equity laws. I think those would be but I think the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is the best agency right now that's been formed to specifically do that.
And if I could just add one thing that's happening right now in the state of New York, there's something somewhat related. It's called this disparity study. So it's a disparity study for women and minorities in the state of New York. And part of that disparity study looks at things like financing, access to capital, contracting, things of that nature. So it's not a watchdog, so to speak, but there is a study that is currently being done here in the state of New York to at least assess where we are.
Hello, my name is Stacy Cox. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. My question is mostly targeted towards Vanessa, and it's about mentorship. And I'm wondering, when you were first starting your business, if you had a mentor, and if you did, how important that mentorship was and maybe currently is to your success.
Can I add, and how did you find that mentor?
Yes, and how did you find that mentor?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And unfortunately, I did not have an official mentor. I really learned as I went along, to be honest with you. And as I learned and exposed myself to being involved with things such as chambers of commerce and getting more involved with programs with the SBA and things with New York City, then I began to really become connected to other women that were very happy to help me, and I could call them and ask a question. And from that, it motivated me to want to really give back or pay it forward. So throughout my business, I also teach at a college out in Long Island. So for my students, I wound up spending so much time out of the classroom because some of them want to become entrepreneurs. So being a part of We NYC is thrilling to me because now I can have like a structured mentoring program. So are mentors important? Absolutely. Again, maybe that's part of my passion since I didn't have it, and I would have gotten things a lot earlier, but it's okay. I'm glad I have it now, and looking forward to really pay it forward.
So Rachel, can you tell us a little bit more about the mentoring program, and how do you connect people in a way that actually works so that it takes hold? Because mentoring is very personal, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we're very excited to launch, actually, tomorrow formally the mentorship, not tomorrow, next week, formally the mentorship program through NYC. And we're actually taking a little bit of a different model to it than I've seen done in the past, because one of the tenets and values of NYC is that we're piloting things that we think can be scaled effectively. And one of the difficulties with mentorship is sometimes that one-on-one matching relationship. So we've taken an approach where mentors are going to be available actually at different times in different ways to women who want to come and take advantage of it. So that's a combination of online chats, conference calls that are held regularly, like every week, and office hours throughout the city. So people can come and speak with someone that they feel can provide them with the best advice. And we've selected a great group of mentors, Vanessa obviously being one of our faves, who also bring a wealth of knowledge in different areas. So we have people with expertise in marketing, in finance. So if you're having an issue with that topic, you are able to reach out to one of those women. So, which is harder to do in a one-on-one relationship because your one mentor isn't going to be an expert in everything. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Thank you.
Can I make one other point on that? So Carla Harris, who runs the National Women's Business Council, because one other point mentors are so critical and so important, but sponsors are as well. And she kind of differentiates.
What's the difference?
Yeah, no, she differentiates. And, you know, mentors, you can show the good, the bad, and the ugly to. Like, you can talk through everything. Sponsors, you only show your good side, and they're the ones that are going to get you to the next thing. And she sometimes says that, and I've heard, you know, or like women are sometimes over-mentored and under-sponsored, and men are over-sponsored and under-mentored. So it's important that you have both of those when you are, whether it be in your career or whether you have a business, because you need folks that are going to just catapult you to the next thing that you're not necessarily going to be able to be as open with, but that will actually get you that next big, you know, contract or deal or job. And you have those folks that you can really trust and get the help you need that will help prepare you to have the right sponsors too. So,
And I will say, personally, sometimes my mentors turned into my sponsor.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
great point.
that can happen as well. Any other questions? Well, this is perfect because I promised everybody that in our last sort of 5 minutes, I'd let them each take a few minutes to say something that we hadn't touched on that they had hoped they'd have a chance to speak about. So we'll just go right down the line, and if you could each sort of keep a 1 to 2 minute limit to what you want to say as summing up, and then we'll go on to the next.
okay, I'll be short. I feel like I talked a lot. I mean, I think just to reiterate that failing forward is an important thing to talk about and really think about. And culturally, how are we really embracing and empowering women entrepreneurs? Are there cultural barriers that we just have because that's the way we've, you know, been as a society? And how do we kind of break down some of those, or at least be aware of them and talk through them, so that if there are women trying to start businesses and trying to grow businesses, we're really pushing them along, taking them along, being sponsors for them and being mentors. And I think the only other thing, because we're a government agency and we don't have an ad budget, I would say if you do have questions about entrepreneurship from the federal government perspective, if you go to sba.gov, all of our resources are there. We have, one thing I didn't mention is my office runs over 100 women's business centers across the country, 5 of which are in the New York area. They're nonprofits, and they specifically focus on socio and economically underserved populations. So we have a lot of resources out there for both the high growth gazelles and also the Main Street and and also the more underserved folks that are just trying to find a way to make a living by, you know, starting a business. So just, I think, visit our website, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards.
So what I would say in summary is, first of all, I'm honored to be here. I was a substitute, and sometimes it's good to be a substitute teacher, right? So I'm really happy to be here. But I'm even more thrilled to be between Erin and Rachel, because both of these organizations offer all of these services for free. I'll say it again, it's for free. The emerging leaders that I just got selected to teach out in Long Island, huge program for free. You have to be making, I think it's like 400,000, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a great free resource to take your business to the next level. The We NYC, you know, I'm a mentor with them. Excellent program for women that are just starting, you know, maybe in some areas that are underserved. So I'm just thrilled and so happy that I was invited to come today and to be here. And two, if there's any questions I can answer, not as a L1 or L2, but as a woman entrepreneur that's passionate about what I do and helping others, I'll be more than glad to take questions after.
Thank you.
I'll echo a lot of what was just said. This is something, as you started the conversation with, that I feel very personally passionate about. And as a city, we're really excited to be delving into this space. I think there's huge opportunities in supporting women entrepreneurs. In fact, actually, Boston just started a We Boston. So we hope that this is something that, we will start and sort of incubate and pilot some new ideas and new things, and then it can grow to other cities as well. So we're very excited to be engaged in this conversation.
Well, can you join me in thanking this incredible panel? And thank you for your attention and your questions. They were fabulous. you take a picture of us? Before we get up?
Oh, can I get one too?
Do you need to you make your announcement, we'll sit.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Thank you again for coming to this panel, and thank you from Law Women and NYU to all of you. This was an excellent discussion, and unfortunately we're up against a couple class blocks, but this is going to be online for students to see, so we're really excited about that. And for those of you in the audience, we have a presentation by the World Bank on their Women, Business, and the Law report coming up next, and then we will finish the day with a cocktail reception. So we invite you all to stay. That will begin in about 15 minutes. Thank you.